This is a really important discussion that we're about to have about fear, about making money, and about the internet, because the internet has changed the game for us, not only as women, but as health practitioners. It's it's really leveled the playing field, I think. And the only thing that separates those of us who are successful from those of us who are not successful is our capacity to learn. And sorry, Facebook's taking a minute. All right, well, we're going to keep going. I'm just going to share this a little bit into my groups because that's what we do. And we'll wait. There we go. So the internet has changed the game, and I'm going to share a story which really, there was 2 calls today that really brought tears to my eyes and just made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And I want to share them with you because they have a lot to do with what's going on in the world right now, and I'm not going to get into that because I'm not necessarily a political person. But I do want to share what's going on. So fear. Let's talk about fear first because it's really the thing that stops us. It's really the thing that stops us from growing. And as I was doing research for this, I was thinking about what fear actually is because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand what fear actually was because I see it stopping so many amazing health practitioners from growing their businesses. And all I hear is, well, what if this happens? Or what if I can't? Or I'm afraid to, or I don't know how. And I was trying to really get a grasp and wrap my head around why some people feel those feelings but then do it anyway. And then some people feel those feelings and stop. And so what I got, I want to actually read to you. And it's from Sadhguru, I think is the person's name. And so it was really interesting because I was trying to understand really what fear was. And the quote was, "Your fear is always about what's going to happen next. That means your fear is always about that which does not exist. If your fear is about the non-existent, your fear is 100% imaginary," which is true. We're always fearing things that could happen. What if nobody shows up to my free seminars? What if nobody buys my product? What if my spouse doesn't support me? What if I fail? What if I make a big fool out of myself? What if this doesn't go my way? What if? And those are all fears that have not yet happened. And when people say that to me, I'm like, okay, well, let's actually walk through that, right? Let's walk through what will actually happen if those things turn out to be true. Because right now, they're just imaginary, right? They're possibilities, but that's not the only possibility. There's the opposite, right? What if your spouse does support you, right? What if people do buy your program? What if people do show up, right? And then there's more fear. Well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if you say the wrong thing, right? What's going to happen, right? Is lightning going to strike you down? No. So all the what ifs, if you really unpack them, you get to this root of this emotional state that you don't want to feel, right? And I was going through this process and I'm like, I don't care if I look like an idiot. I genuinely don't. I look like an idiot most of the time, I think. I don't care, right? Why don't I care? Why am I not afraid to look like an idiot? Because I have confidence that The more times I look like an idiot, the bigger my bank grows, the bigger my bank account grows, because that means that there are more times that I actually win. There are more times that I say the right thing and I'm able to help the right people, right? And so I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about this idea that fear does not exist. And then something that was interesting in this article, about socially accepted levels of insanity, right? If we're always in the state, if we're always living in this state of what if, that means that we're not grounded in what we're actually doing, right? And so you're always living in this like dream type, non-real, non-existent, imaginary state. And the article was describing it as socially accepted levels of insanity, which I laughed at because I think it's true, right? You kind of feel a little bit insane, but it's socially acceptable. You think it's just normal, right? And so it goes on to say, your suffering is always about that which does not exist. Simply because you're not rooted in reality. You're always rooted in your mind. Mind is, one part of it is memory, another part of it is an imagination. Both of them are in one way imagination, because both of them don't exist right now, right? Your memory is past and fear is future. Both of them are imaginary because they don't exist. Like right now, this is it. This is all that we have, right? You're lost in your imagination, and that's the basis of your fear. If your fear were rooted in reality, the reality is you know enough to help people. The reality is you don't need a logo. The reality is you're going to say the wrong thing sometimes. Those are the realities. If your perception of socially acceptable or your perception of success was rooted in reality instead of fear, you would be like GSDing down the block, right? Versus stopping yourself and procrastinating at every turn because of this imaginary what if scenario, which I promise you at some point will happen. You will look like an idiot more than once. You won't know the answer to some questions more than once. You're going to put out something that bombs. You're going to hold a seminar that nobody shows up to. People aren't going to support you. They're going to think you're batshit crazy. It's going to happen because it's happened to me and it continues to happen to me, right? So, but this is what I was trying to wrap my head around is like, why don't I care? Why am I not afraid then to move forward and to create the next thing and to do those things? And it's because I'm not afraid to feel embarrassed. I'm not afraid to fail, right? And I think, and so the question, I wrote this really good question down, and I want you to really think about it. Because this is the hard stuff. I can teach you sales funnels all day long. I can teach you about lead magnets. I can teach you about how to, use Excel to track your money and Facebook ads and webinars. But this is the stuff. This is the stuff that really matters. So the question is, this is a good one, and it's one to ponder over the weekend. Why don't you want to experience all of the things that you fear? Why don't you want to experience embarrassment and feeling like an idiot and putting out a program that bombs? Why don't you want to feel those things, right? Because it hurts, because it's uncomfortable, because we're not taught to value failure, because your self-worth, because that means that maybe you aren't good at this. Like really unpack that, right? And why don't you want to experience all of the things that you fear? Because it's hard, because it hurts. But they're also the most tremendous learning experiences. Like the way that I think about it is like, bring it, right? Like, let's go. Let me fail big. So that at least I can look back and go, okay, well, at least I did something, number one. I was in the arena, which feels really good. And number two, I'm not going to give up anytime soon because I don't have a plan B. So that means I actually didn't fail, because the only way that you could fail is if you quit. So if I do something and it doesn't go as expected, then I can sit back and go, okay, well, A, I did it. So now I have a plan. I have a path. B, what can I do better next time? Right? And so when you're taking longer than you should be taking to launch something, whether it's a blog post, an email, a pitch, a program, whatever it is, I want you to sit there and go, okay, what am I really afraid of? What am I really afraid of? Am I afraid of looking like an idiot? Am I afraid of looking unprofessional? What if that were true? Like, what if I did look unprofessional? Is that going to affect your career for your whole life? Probably not, right? And so what is the worst case scenario? And I've done this with a bunch of my coaching clients who became coaching clients, but they were afraid to invest the money. And I said, okay, if you really had a no plan B commitment, the difference between like some people who are still 1 foot in, 1 foot out and the people who are 2 feet in is that in terms of investing in themselves, are you willing to sell your house? Are you willing to sell your prized possessions to make your dream a reality, to potentially have a better life later? If you're not willing to, that's okay, but you need to stop what you're doing before you get to that point, because that's your worst case and you can't handle that. But once you know your worst case, then you're okay. You know that's the point where you stop, right? Or that's the point where you reach out for help, or that's the point where you reevaluate, or whatever it is. But once you know that worst case, there's no more fear, because this is the worst case. This is the worst possible thing that can happen to you. You have a plan. Now move forward, right? Now move forward. So why don't you want to experience the fear feelings, right? And what's the worst case scenario, right? So there's another, fear is never about what has happened. It's always about what may happen, right? And maybe it won't happen, but you'll never know until you actually try it, right? And it was really interesting to me because, and I understand the money, believe me, there was plenty of time where I had no money, right? But I didn't care, because my worst case scenario was that I would sell my house. I would sell my house and move into a 1-bedroom apartment with my kids, in a heartbeat. I would, because I knew without a shadow of a doubt, if that's what I had to do to transform my life, I was not happily willing to do it, but I would do it, and I would do it in a blink of an eye. So for me, investing the money that I didn't have wasn't anxiety provoking, because I had this piece of real estate that I could, not this specific one that I'm living in now, but 5 years ago, this piece of it, I had a fallback plan in terms of where I could get money from. So that was my worst case scenario. And so in making money, speed of implementation and being able to go above and beyond is how you make money. And I see so many people who are launching their health businesses and they're launching their programs, which is amazing. Nothing makes my heart happier than a woman who drills down and launches their shit. Nothing makes me happier. And yet sometimes the reality is this thing that we feared, these no sales, it happens. Why does it happen? Because if we think about it from a storefront perspective, okay, you opened a store on a new block where there's no other real estate, and you put up an open sign. There's no residential, there's no foot traffic, there's nothing. Your store is in the middle of nowhere. I was just going to drop an F-bomb, but I decided not to. Your store is in the middle of nowhere. And just because you put an open sign doesn't mean all of a sudden people are going to start. It's not a if you build it, they will come scenario, right? And so step 1, build the store and get it finished. Launch the program. Step 2, now we need to start bringing people to where you are, or you need to start going out and finding where they are and bringing them back to the store. That's step 2, right? And so launching is step 1. And I always say, launching for the first time ever is just to get the shit done. It's just to get it done and finished. It's very hard to build your email list, to build your brand, to create a program, to launch it, to do all of those things all at the same time, right? And so I'm sharing this because the biggest fear is that you won't be able to make enough money to sustain this as a career. And that's just not true, except if you have the mindset that it's all going to happen the first time you launch, because that's not true. That doesn't happen, right? And so I want you to understand where that fear is. I want you to define for yourself what's your worst case scenario. And I want you to have a really good look at, are you living in reality? Is there any proof in your life that this isn't going to work for you? Is there actual proof? Probably not. What about other things that you've tried? Did you fail at every single thing you've ever tried? Probably not. Have you helped people before in whatever niche you are in, belong to, whatever? Yes, you have, right? I'm going to assume that you have. Have you helped yourself or a loved one? Yes, you have. Do you have enough passion to wrap it around the moon twice? Yes, I'm going to assume yes. Those are the things that are true, right? So let's try the next time that you feel the fear, right, around putting yourself out there on the internet, around making money, around trying something new, around mastering a technology, whatever it is that is stopping you from taking really fast action, right? The speed of implementation wins. Whatever's stopping you, I want you to be like, all right, fear, where's this coming from? And is this true, right? Or am I living in this sort of socially accepted insanity world? Because fear is based in something that hasn't happened yet. There's no proof that that's going to happen, right? There's probably proof to the contrary. And why don't you want to experience whatever that failure is going to bring you, or that fear is going to bring you anyway? Why don't you want to experience that? I want to. Give me the lesson. Bring it, right? That's my mindset, is all right, I'm going to do this thing. It's a 50-50 shot that it's going to work out. I'm good either way because I'm going to learn and I'm going to be a better person for it. And yeah, maybe it's going to sting and maybe some people are going to look at me and be like, ha, 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 see, you failed. And I'll be like, fuck you, right? Because that's just how it is. That's just how it is. It has to be this way. If you ask any successful person, they've had more failures than they've had successes. And the failures are the things that contribute the most to the successes. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, because I had a call with a woman whose first language was not English, who humility was a painful but great lesson. So nice to hear this. Yeah, always, right? I mean, this is life. And this is going to be harsh and this might sting a little, and it's said with so much love. But what does that say about you as a business owner and as a coach if you're not willing to work through the fears of what could happen when there's no real proof that they're actually going to happen? You have to do the work to work through the fear so that you stand in a place of empowerment and confidence when you go and work with clients. I could not be sitting here saying this to you had I not done it for myself and continue to do it. It's a never-ending process. I would feel like a fraud, right? But I can sit here and confidently talk to you about the fears that I've had and what it feels like to fail, and that I want the lessons and, bring them to me gently and not all at the same time, right? But that's how you get better as a person. That's how you develop as a person. That's what's going to set you apart from everybody else, is that you're not going to let the fear of what could happen stop you from building the business and life of your dreams, because it's not real. It's just not real. It's just not. And so I'll leave you with that. I'm not going to ramble on. But yeah, that's really what I wanted to share with you today. Go investigate what fear actually is, really. There's a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she talks about how fear is the most boring part about her. Because it is. It's boring. We all have the same fears. Your fears are not any different than my fears. The only difference is that I'm open to them, and I embrace them as part of the process. And as Elizabeth Gilbert would say, like, they're in the back seat, I'm driving, right? And so if that's something that you want to work on, I would recommend you get that book. But at the same time, like, just give it a think, like, give it a good long think. Like, what are the fears? Is there any truth to them? No, probably not. So just acknowledge them, say hello, say thank you. Thank you for trying to keep me safe and protected. I'm good, and move forward. I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me. It's always a pleasure to interact with you in this way. And have a good weekend. We'll talk soon. Bye.